Mr. Sangay, thank you very much for taking our request for the interview. We are broadcasting in the region where the Tibetan issue is not on the main political agenda, but rising Chinese influence is. You, as a head of the Tibetan government in exile, have been repeating quite some time that all countries building an economic relations with China have to consider so-called Tibetan narrative, not only economical profit, but also the brutality Chinese government takes in your region. How successful have you been in promoting this view?
It depends. But now with the rise of China, there are many who they want to know what this China is all about. Hence, it's very important that they ought to know the Tibetan narrative, because what happened to Tibet could happen to anyone, including Europe. And one can say it's already happening, but Tibet was, physically occupied or colonized. But Europe is getting economically occupied. Through economy, political influence is happening. Right here in Prague to various capitals in Europe, you can clearly see that Chinese influence is everywhere. Hence, there are people, they want to know what is China capable of. If they know the Tibetan narrative, how brutal they have been, how we were occupied, how Tibetans are even repressed, even now, how our monasteries, nunneries were destroyed, how 152 Tibetans have burned themselves to commit self-immolation, to protest against Chinese government policies, clearly show what China is capable of.
And do European governments actually understand this? How's the development in this?
Yeah, we've been saying this for 60 years. Even me, I've been in my position for 7 years. First few years, not so interested. They will have a polite meeting and they will just don't believe what we are saying. But now they want to know, So in recent meetings, they actually want to know, because Chinese government policies are right here in the capitals of Europe, and hence they're interested. So now what do they do about it is second matter.
At the beginning of the year, your government said that it hoped that the second term of Chinese leader Xi Jinping will be marked, hopefully, with some liberalization. But what's going on again in this eastern Turkestan, in Xinjiang, shows that the opposite direction. Many people just disappear. Representatives of local Muslim community, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Tatars, they are taken to so-called correction camps where inhumanly held, harassed, intimidated. Do you consider any common actions with Uyghur activists showing these cases to the world too?
When Chinese army first came to Tibet, they promised us peace, prosperity and harmony. Now, as far as Freedom House is concerned, they come out with Freedom Index every year. In 2016 and 2017, Syria was listed as the least free region. After Syria, it was Tibet. Now, many people know about Syria, but how many people know that Tibet is the least free region in the whole world, second least free region? So that's how repressive the Chinese government system is. Now, same thing with our brothers and sisters in Xinjiang as well. Uyghur people are repressed. The party secretary general, who was controlling Tibet, was sent to Xinjiang to implement the same policy, same technology, same algorithm. And what you see with our Uyghur brothers and sisters is exactly what he did in Tibet.
But you never had sort of correction camps so far in Tibet?
Yes, we had. The education through labor or correction camps were already there.
And people disappearing from families?
People disappear, all that happened. But in what's happening in Xinjiang is at a massive scale. We are talking about more than 1 million people in a correction camp. And at the scale it's happening is massive. But it started in Tibet, they have scaled up in Xinjiang. But the same technology and algorithm that they use to repress and control people are used all over China. Now they're exporting it to totalitarian regimes in various parts of the world. So what happens in Tibet and Xinjiang will be replicated in the rest of the world. So it's no more about Tibetan people. or Uyghurs, you see. It's coming to all over the world. So when you see almost 10% of the population in correction camp, that shows what China is capable of.
And do you cooperate in this with Uyghur activists?
Yes, we meet all the time. I have many Uyghur friends. In fact, we will be having one event in Geneva in early November. And there we will have participants of Chinese dissidents, democracy activists, Mongolians and Uyghurs, and Tibetans sharing the same platform. Yeah.
You already said that it's not only China. Many foreign governments actually looking at that kind of experiment China does in Xinjiang, and totalitarian governance is expanding into there as well. And in this forum, you probably also talked about it. The area of democracy is shrinking. In case of we are returning back to Xinjiang, for example, Russian government follows the events. Why? Because recently Putin's regime launched a sort of new Russification policy against its minorities, against minority languages. And Moscow is quite anxious and curious what Chinese will do with its minorities. So my general question is the totalitarian future expects us?
If you look at the global affairs, the challenge to democracy or threat to liberal values have never been greater and more serious. So there are autocratic rulers, there are authoritarian regimes spreading or increasing all over the world. And China is at the right and center as the biggest challenge to democracy. So what do you do, Now the choice is you either follow Chinese model without democracy, or you follow our model, which is with democracy.
So what's your model? I mean, given your experience of decades-long fight against brutalities in your region, you usually promote the dialogue, peaceful coexistence, enlightenment, mutual understanding. Does it all work?
It will work, and it should work, because what we follow is democracy. My position is directly elected by Tibetans in 30 countries. We have our own elected parliament, 3 pillars of democracy. Even though we're in exile, it's a democracy in exile, democracy without borders. It's a functioning administration, right? And what we also follow is non-violence. So if democracy is good, if non-violence is good, then that's the Tibetan model. Now, if we fail, it's not simply because Tibetans will fail. Democracy and non-violence will fail.
But at the same time, Chinese government considers the very existence of government in exile a violence already, like extremism.
Oh, that they will always say, But when you define extremism, there has to be elements of violence or something radical. Ours is not. Ours is non-violent, democratic, a peaceful system, and we want to solve the issue of Tibet through dialogue with the representative of the Chinese government. This is as moderate, as reasonable as one can get, right? And if they are defining us as threatening, then is their security being exposed, insecurity being exposed, rather than, that we are being unreasonable.
Mr. Sangay, thank you very much for your interview.
Thank you very much for being on your show.
Thanks. Thank you.